It's Monday, November 3rd here in Seoul. I'm Hwang Ji-hye filling in for Laah Hyun-kyung. Thanks for tuning in. And these are the stories we're following at this hour. Korea's parliament gets to work on reviewing next year's budget by the end of this November. But meeting the deadline does not appear to be an easy task, with the rival parties already at odds over the details. U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry praises China for putting stronger pressure on North Korea over its nuclear program by imposing trade restrictions. Kerry says China is being helpful. And a new United Nations report warns of the profound risk coming from climate change, saying that greenhouse gas emissions will have to be reduced to zero by the end of the century or else. We begin today's newscast at the National Assembly. Lawmakers are tasked with a very important duty this week, and that is reviewing next year's budget. But the rival parties are already locking horns on whether the budget plan is sufficient for boosting the ailing domestic economy. Ji Myung-gil reports.
Discussions on next year's budget have begun at the National Assembly, with the ruling and opposition parties promising to pass it by the legal deadline of December 2nd. The 2015 budget calls for a 5.7% on-year increase in government spending to some $350 billion.
We must meet the legal deadline, as it is our last best opportunity to boost Korea's economy.
The ruling minority party says the budget promoted by the government as necessary for boosting the economy must be kept intact. But the main opposition New Politics Alliance for Democracy has been stepping up its attacks on the government's recent expansionary fiscal and monetary policies, promoting its own plan instead.
We have 5 principles set for next year's budget: endorsing financial health for the central and local governments, restoring corporate taxes for conglomerates, increasing household income, and securing a bigger budget for safety-related purposes.
Compounding concerns about the increased budget plans, the government has been facing a shortfall of tax revenue since 2012. According to the Finance Ministry, the government collected $126 billion in national tax revenue from January to August, which is down to $178 million from the same period last year. And while both parties are speaking in optimistic terms about the budget being passed by December 2nd, Korea's parliament is notorious for its year-end budget wars. No budget bill has been passed by the legal deadline since 2002. However, that won't be the case this year, as parliamentary law revisions made last year mean the draft proposal will be automatically referred to the regular session on December 1st, even if the rival parties don't reach an agreement on the bill. Ji Myung-gil, ARIRANG News.
Staying at the National Assembly, lawmakers are questioning top officials from government ministries and offices related to foreign affairs, as well as unification and security issues. Topping the agenda was the recent agreement between South Korea and the United States to delay the transfer of wartime operational control from Washington to Seoul. The ruling party says the extension was necessary to counter North Korea's nuclear threats, while the main opposition party demanded an apology from President Park Geun-hye for breaking her campaign pledge. The flying of anti-Pyongyang leaflets by South Korean activists across the border, which led to the cancellation of planned high-level inter-Korean talks last week, is another issue to come up. And over in North Korea, where pressure to denuclearize is mounting, U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry says China is putting stronger pressure on the North than it was a year ago, citing trade restrictions. Kim Min-ji has the details.
U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry has praised China for doing more to pressure North Korea. Speaking with Bloomberg News, Kerry said the Chinese were taking measures beyond the ones they were a year ago. He cited examples such as China reducing the amount of jet fuel being exported to the north and additional limitations being placed on trade. Kerry also noted that Chinese President Xi Jinping has held at least 5 meetings with South Korean President Park Geun-hye, but none with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. Seoul and Washington have long called on China, North Korea's only major ally, to play a greater role in getting Pyongyang to demonstrate a willingness to give up its nuclear weapons. But Beijing had been accommodating toward the North in fear of hurting Chinese national interests. Kerry added that there's still an uncertainty as to where the North Korean leader wants to take his country and that this view is shared by China. The top U.S. diplomat also said Washington is as keen as Beijing to restart the long-stalled six-party talks on the North's denuclearization, but stressed the U.S. needs assurances that Pyongyang is prepared to discuss scrapping its nuclear weapons. Kim Min-ji, ARIRANG News.
And despite calls to Pyongyang to return to the negotiating table, German lawmaker Hartmut Korschik, a longtime advocate for Korean unification, says North Korea actually wants to talk to South Korea. Korschik was in Pyongyang for 6 days recently and held talks with the chairman of the Supreme People's Assembly and North Korean Vice Foreign Minister before paying a visit to Seoul last week. Our Hwang Ji-hye sat down with him for a chat.
When you talked to North Korean officials during your stay there, what did they say about inter-Korean relations?
Many of the North Korean officials I spoke with were very clear. North Korea hopes to improve relations with South Korea. The attendance of 3 high-level officials at the closing ceremony of the Asian Games shows this very well. They said rebuilding trust is the most important step for improving South-North relations. As the basis for trust building, they referred to former South Korean President Kim Dae-jung's visit to North Korea in 2000 and the June 15th joint statement that followed.
There are speculations about the regime instability in North Korea. What was your impression?
Of course, Kim Jong-un's power cannot be compared to that of his father, Kim Jong-il, in his prime, but he has enough leverage to control the current situation. The power is not held solely by him, though. It is divided among other agents, such as the party, the military, or the economic bodies. But Kim is able to maintain a balance among them. However, I do see a need for a policy to promote overall stability.
So before your visit to Pyongyang, you also visited China and you met with officials there. Did you have any talks about North Korea with them?
There are tensions between North Korea and China. China wants North Korea to return to the six-party framework and to pursue more reform measures on its own. But at the same time, its biggest interest is securing stability in North Korea and on the Korean peninsula. Therefore, Beijing is not opposed to Pyongyang's relations with Europe and Berlin. And China believes its friendship with South Korea is helpful in maintaining stability on the Korean peninsula and Northeast Asia.
You've been a long-time advocate of the unification of the two Koreas. In your view, what's the biggest hurdle to the Korean unification, and how do we make that leap?
The challenge can be largely divided into 2. First is solving the dire humanitarian situation in North Korea. The second, and the most important and difficult task, is North Korea's nuclear program. The neighboring countries must also be considered. The fundamental step is resolving tensions between the two Koreas, but at the same time, seeking understanding from the United States, China, and Japan remains a challenge.
And where does Germany come in?
Germany will not be a mediator. It will also not be a master that can offer a great deal of knowledge. But what we can do is to give little bits of advice based on our own experience with unification.
Thank you, Mr. Korschik, for your time today.
Shifting gears, Korea and the Netherlands signed a number of deals today that aim to strengthen cooperation in the areas of nuclear energy, scientific research, and agriculture. During King Willem Alexander's state visit to Seoul, the two sides officially put pen to paper on an agreement for the €19 million Dutch research reactor project that a Korean consortium won an order for in June. Korea and the Netherlands also agreed to work together in research of the human brain, agriculture, and food. Welcoming the Dutch King and Queen, President Park anticipated greater cooperation between the two countries and across a number of economic sectors. Now, Korea's favorite and #1 messaging application, Kakao is stretching its boundaries and aiming to go global, backed by new services and its recent merger with the country's second-largest internet portal operator, 다음. But will it be enough to win over consumers outside of Korea? Shin Se-min has this week's industry insight.
9 out of 10 smartphone users in Korea use Kakao, the country's #1 mobile messaging service. In Korea, you don't say I'll text you, you say I'll katalk you. But it's not stopping there.
The services Kakao offers are expansive and growing all the time. Users can send small amounts of money, go shopping, and even send gifts and vouchers. Kakao is also able to connect small businesses with their customers. Soon, it aims to roll out features that allow users to call a taxi and control their home appliances, and even help drivers find an empty parking spot.
We already have a solid platform here at Kakao, but we never stop innovating, and extra features are in the works all the time. By making use of 다음's established portal, we're looking to provide more state-of-the-art services that will eventually be used in our daily lives.
Kakao merged with Korea's second-largest internet portal, Daum Corporation, this year and went public last month. Daum Kakao currently has a market capitalization of over $7 billion, making it one of the country's largest IT firms. Under its new slogan, Connect Everything, Daum Kakao is hoping to lead the march to have everything connected to the internet. A personalized location-based service is under development, drawing on the strength of each arm of the business. By utilizing Daum's pre-existing and highly detailed map service, Kakao hopes to launch a feature that notifies users when they're near a restaurant chain or clothing store they like. However, as with any company that has global aspirations, challenges lie ahead, namely convincing international consumers to make the jump to Kakao.
Daum Kakao missed the boat for entering the global market. Countries already have their preferred messaging services. In China, they like WeChat. Line is in Japan, and WhatsApp has a grip on the US. It's going to be really hard for Daum Kakao to squeeze in between.
The company also has problems closer to home after Kakao was rocked by a privacy scandal. A significant number of users abandoned Kakao for foreign messaging applications like Germany's Telegram following the revelation that the Korean company had given prosecutors access to thousands of their users' private conversations. But it's only been a month since Daum and Kakao joined forces, and some say it's too soon to tell whether its success at home will translate into success overseas. Shin Se-min, ARIRANG News.
One of Samsung Group's oldest founding companies is set to go public by the end of this year, setting the stage for more Samsung affiliates to quickly follow suit. This also paves the way for Samsung Electronics to establish a holding company early next year. Hwang Ji-hye explains what Korea's biggest conglomerate is hoping to achieve through this process.
Seoul Industries, the mother company of Samsung Group that was founded 6 decades ago, is going public. Seoul filed for an initial public offering of around $50 per share to the Financial Supervisory Service on Friday, with plans to go public on December 18th, earlier than the market forecast of the first quarter of next year. Just days before Seoul's listing, Samsung's IT services subsidiary, Samsung SDS, also filed for an IPO on December 14th with a starting stock price of $185 per share. Market analysts view this as a means of speeding up the group's restructuring to found a Samsung Holdings company that could eventually shore up control for the conglomerate's family members. One of the most plausible scenarios is that Samsung Electronics splits in two in the first quarter of next year, with one becoming a holdings company and merging with Seoul Industries. Now, why go through with this process? Because this way, the heir apparent to the Samsung throne, Lee Jae-yong, who owns a quarter of Seoul Industries' share as its biggest shareholder, can minimize inheritance taxes with his share of Seoul stocks dropping to 8%. At the same time, he increases his influence in Samsung Electronics as his current share of 0.6% jumps to that same level. 송지선, 아리랑 뉴스.
And moving on to some international news, a United Nations panel has issued a stark warning on global climate change, saying greenhouse gas emissions must be phased out within the next 85 years. If they aren't, the implications could be catastrophic. Kim Hyun-bin reports.
The United Nations climate body is warning that time is not on our side to stop soaring temperatures, making the world unlivable. Launching the latest study from the Environmental Panel on Climate Change, the UN said the world faces severe, widespread, and irreversible effects if moves are not made to completely stop using fossil fuels by 2100. It says the use of low-carbon sources needs to rise from 30% of electricity generation now to more than 80% by the middle of the century to limit rising temperatures.
The window of action is really closing very rapid. If you look at the total carbon budget to ensure that temperature increase by the end of this century will not exceed 2 degrees Celsius, we've already used up a substantial share of this.
Scientists say a rise of 2 degrees Celsius is the level at which the dangerous impacts of climate change will be felt. But the IPCC says the world is at risk of temperatures soaring by 4.8 degrees or even higher by 2100 if things continue as they are.
So this clearly shows that we have a very limited window of opportunity, and I think the global community must look at these numbers and show the resolve by which we can bring about change.
UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon also stressed the need for action before it's too late.
Inaction of climate action will cost much, much more. This climate action and economic growth are two sides of just one coin.
The IPCC study will be the main handbook for 200 nations when they meet for a global summit on climate change in Paris late next year. China, the United States, the EU, and India are the world's biggest greenhouse gas emitters. Kim Hyun-bin, ARIRANG News.
And an apparent suicide blast near Pakistan's only border crossing with India has killed at least 55 people and left around 120 wounded. The deadly explosion took place on Sunday in Wagah, a town on the border, following a daily flag lowering ceremony that draws hundreds of people on both sides. Pakistanis were hit with the brunt of the attack as it took place 500 meters on their side of the border. Dozens of people use the crossing every day as it serves as an important trade route. The Pakistani Taliban has claimed responsibility for Sunday's strike. On a brighter note, Korea is poised to have a 17th item added to UNESCO's Intangible Cultural Heritage List. It's nongak, a traditional music that used to be played by farmers to encourage cooperation during the busiest times of the year. Our Connie Lee introduces us to the world of nongak.
Drums, gongs, parading, dancing, and acrobatic feats. It's all part of what is called nongak. It's traditional Korean music that was originally performed by farmers in the early 1900s. Scholars say it was first introduced during the Japanese colonization of Korea. Nongak was performed in groups to encourage one another to work better in the fields and to help them overcome the difficulties of agricultural life. But today, it is a popular performing art seen all around Korea, especially during the holidays. And in the coming weeks, this art is set to be tabbed as a UNESCO Intangible Cultural Heritage. This after a UNESCO deliberative body made a unanimous decision to recommend nongak.
The unanimous recommendation is a very rare case. This is a great opportunity to share with the world the significance of nongak.
In a report on the deliberation, UNESCO says the music is characterized by vitality and creativity, providing performers and audiences with a sense of identity. The final decision will be made at the end of this month during a meeting at UNESCO's headquarters in Paris. Officials, however, say it is most likely that nongak will be added to UNESCO's Intangible Cultural Heritage List as Korea's 17th item. Others on the list include Korea's folk song ARIRANG and kimjang, or the making and sharing of kimchi. Connie Lee, ARIRANG News.
when heading to the library, most students take their books and computers to get some studying done. But one university is looking to breathe some new life into the venue by changing the surroundings. Our Im Yoon-hee joins us with more. Welcome to the studio, Yoon-hee.
Thank you for having me. So let's start this Monday off with a very unique exhibition.
Great.
So it takes place at the Chunbuk National University. They're now hosting an exhibition where students frequent, or at least should frequent, on a daily basis. So take a look.
Set in the middle of one of the quietest places on campus, the library is not where you'd expect to encounter art. But now, amid the hustle and bustle of prepping for exams and papers, students can also enlighten their cultural sides as well, with calligraphy art. One of the oldest forms of art, calligraphy is the art of writing. And what better place than a library full of words to house these works of art?
There was a lot of empty space in the library, but now it's filled with this calligraphy art, which is very meaningful. I feel calm looking at the pieces and also don't feel like I'm wasting time.
They range from the traditional Korean writing to playful recreations of everyday images. And while the top priority for students is still, of course, to study, these artworks are aimed at enriching each student's experience as they spend grueling hours surrounded by books and computers.
Seeing all this beautiful traditional Korean calligraphy leaves a very deep impression.
It's a traditional form of art that younger generations are growing further away from as they get pulled closer to technology. But artist Kim Do-kyung aims to change that and bring the traditional art to the students.
If you come into the university, there's very limited space. However, we chose this place with these young people and their lives in mind.
Some of the calligraphy works have even been transformed into digital versions, a unique interpretation, resulting in something that is sure to catch the eyes of the tech-savvy students.
So I know, especially in Korea, libraries are such a stressful place for many students because they're forced to go to good universities. But I guess this kind of event is definitely lightening up the venue.
Right, that's exactly what they wanted to do. So libraries can be very stressful. That's how many students feel, especially nowadays in a very computer-centric generation. Some of the older generations are really worried that the appreciation for calligraphy is going to fade with time. And so that's why artist Kim chose this location smack dab in the middle of the student's life to put these beautiful works of art so that they can appreciate calligraphy and get more familiar with it.
So tell us more about the calligraphy designer.
Sure thing. So this is his 8th solo exhibition, and on this exhibition he has 30 works on display for this round. So he also has a permanent exhibition in Jeonju called the Munja Hyang House, and so that's a studio as well, so people can visit that if they'd like. But Hangul has often been incorporated with art nowadays. It's not new to see that, but with this, artist Kim really does incorporate this classic beauty of Hangul along with some modern images like little animals and cute things that students really can kind of associate with and appreciate.
So thanks for joining in for that, Yoon-hee.
My pleasure.
Good afternoon. Well, the first week of November is kicking off under a very cold conditions. I mean, even right now, it feels quite chilly outside. And a bright sunshine is not helping much to relieve the coldness as the temperatures will remain on the chilly side all day long. So be sure to dress warmly before heading out. And with that in mind, let's take a closer look at the readings for today. Now, the daytime high in the capital and Busan will be topping out at 15, while while Daegu and Gwangju will get up to 14 this afternoon. On to other regions. It looks like Jeju Island and Daejeon will be getting up to 15 and 13 respectively, while Dokdo sees a high of 11. Well, the cold will ease up a bit tomorrow afternoon with highs rebounding into the seasonal averages, but big drop in temperature is expected once again at the end of the week. Well, that's all for me today. Be sure to stay warm and have a wonderful rest of the day.
And that wraps up our newscast. I'll be back at 4 p.m. Korea time. Thanks for watching.